Hello, everyone. Welcome to the course. And today we're going to discuss lean analytics and how it applies to growth marketing. Swati, how are you?
Hi, Rishabh. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yep, doing well. Ready to start?
Yes, let's start.
So before I even get into it, lean analytics is also the title of a book. And
Mhm.
it's all about lean analytics, which is essentially a startup version of using data, a startup or a lean version of using data analytics. Analytics in general represents the measurement of how you're moving towards your goals, right?
Right.
And it could be personal goals, it could be business goals, it could be large corporate goals. But for everything, you need some sort of framework for measurement of those goals. Now, typically, analytics, when people think of that, they think of a lot of metrics, a lot of data points, and we are trying to sort of minimize the amount of metrics, the amount of frameworks by coming up with a leaner approach to analytics. And that's why it's called lean analytics. So while we will cover a lot of concepts in this video, I would still recommend everyone to read the lean analytics book. And it's sort of like a reference. You don't have to read the entire book, but the key concepts, the fundamental skills of analytics should be read in the book. And then the book has different business case studies, and you can just deep dive into the businesses that you're most interested in, right? So I personally have, what I've done is I've taken the book printout in A4 size paper. So what I do is I took a printout in the sense of having one side about the chapter, and then one side I just try to keep it blank so I can make notes. So this
Yeah.
is sort of like a reference book. So you see, it's quite a fat book.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of like these charts and explanations that you can look into. But yeah, I think we'll try to summarize the takeaways from the book and also try to understand this from a practical perspective. So before we even start, Swati, tell me any one goal that that you would like to achieve in 2023. Let's say it could be a business goal or a personal goal.
I think if I talk about one of my personal goals, it's so right now, like I want to focus on my health. So it would be, being a certain like gaining weight, being a certain weight. So my
Right.
daily approach to it is like maintaining a certain lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah.
So your goal is to eventually gain weight, right? And
Yeah.
then what you can do is there are two aspects of this. One is sort of like a visualization aspect, is that this is a certain body type that I want to be. And then the second is a more, quantitative aspect, that this is the number that I want to achieve.
Sure.
Something that I personally have is to get to 15% or lower body fat percentage. So my body fat percentage is 16 to 17%, somewhere in that range. And I want to bring it down from that to below 15%. It's honestly not the best not the best body fat percentage to be in, but it's okay for me. That's where I want to be. So one of the things that I have in mind is, when I'm making this goal, is that I have a number that I've already measured, that this is my current body fat percentage. And then eventually I have a number that I want to get to, which is like below 15%. So even if it's like 14 point some percent, that will be sort of achieve. That would be success for me. That means success for me. And then I've also defined sort of a timeline. So I want to do it before my birthday, which is in November. So I have a few months to go.
Right.
Those are like two or three things which help. One is defining the right metric, of course, but after that, having a start number that, obviously you can measure your current weight, and that will be like your starting number. Having an end number, and then your gaining weight would be more specific, that, this is the weight that I want to get to. Of course, it might be hard if you've not done the same journey before to know which weight you'll be happy
Yeah.
the way you look. But you'll have to start with some sort of number and then adjust, or, revise that number once you're getting there and you feel you maybe want to gain a little bit more, and so forth. And then the timeline is very important, because otherwise they say that goals without a timeline are dreams.
I agree. Yeah.
So we don't want to have too many dreams. We want to have specific goals. So then the time range for me, like I have to do it before my birthday. So I have to plan my workouts and the small details accordingly. And
Mm.
you're right, like it has to become a lifestyle if you want to sustain it. But this is more like a specific goal that I want to get to. And then the tools that I use to get to that goal, I can make those as habits.
Habits.
And then it becomes a lifetime thing. So this is based on the stage of the business. So in my case, it's just a phase that I am in where I want to be feeling better about how much weight I'm carrying around. Like it's the opposite of your goal. I want to reduce the body fat percentage.
Yeah.
So just like that, in personal life, once you achieve this and you're able to maintain it, your stage will change, right? And then your goals would change. Then so look at it this way, the North Star metric is to gain weight. And then
Yeah.
your OMTM could be basically, let's say, to consume X number of calories a day.
Mm.
That could be or to have in the next 30 days to increase your weight by 10%. That could be an OMTM. The
Mm.
reason why I keep saying percentages is because percentages show better data. They reflect better data than a number,
Okay.
especially in a business case. So if you look at the number of users on your app, that's just a number. It does not mean a lot. But if you start looking at the percentage of active users on your app, it means slightly more than the number of users on your app, because these users are active, right?
Okay.
There could be a lot of inactive users. Who cares about them? Right? I mean, you want to convert it to active users, but you can't show that your business is going to be successful by the number of inactive users that you have. Right?
Mm.
So percentage of active users on your app is slightly better, but percentage of active users month over month for your app is much better, because then it shows, okay, last month I had 25% active users, but this month I have 26%. So I'm doing something which is improving,
Okay.
right? The results. So imagine that your goal is to, like my goal is to get to 15% in the next 6 months. But in the next 3 months, I may not be able to see 15%, but I should be able to see 16% or 15.8%. And then the adding the time factor there sort of gives me more visibility in terms of whether I'm going in the right direction. If I'm going to be able to achieve this by the date that I have set for myself, and if not, I don't want to extend the date. So what should I change in the
Okay.
execution to match it, right? Make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So those are a few things about goals and metrics. So the difference is this is your goal, but there are many metrics that you can measure on the way. While we do have the concept of OMTM, which means the only metric that matters, that is the one metric that matters for you. It could be how much you weigh. For me, it could be the body fat percentage. But there are other small metrics that play a role during this journey. There could be the number of calories consumed. It could be, for me, the number of exercise minutes per day on an average. It could be if I'm doing a lot of cardio, what's my VO2 max? If I'm in general looking at improving my lifestyle, it could be we could geek out on the metrics a little bit more, but there have to be some metrics that would lead into your goals, right? So I'm not too neurotic about having just one OMTM and then not measuring anything else. We don't have to go that lean, but I do think that there are some metrics, like just the number of times I am going to the gym in a week is a very simple metric, but it's a sort of a habit that will eventually get me to my goals if that's my preferred way of working out, right? So
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's also like I want I give myself a number, so maybe 30 minutes of movement
yeah,
in the morning and maybe 30 minutes in the evening.
yeah,
This kind of a goal. Yeah.
correct. So right, recently I've started working on zone 2 cardio, which is essentially cardio where you can do it for longer periods of time. You can still hold a conversation while you're doing
Okay.
it, but your heart rate is still up. So I want to reach 60 minutes of zone 2 cardio on weekends, either Saturday or Sunday. But yeah, I'm slowly pushing towards that goal. But like that's a metric. I'm not saying that that's the key metric, but it's definitely going to help me reduce my body fat percentage because of the endurance that I've built by pursuing that, and the fact that it's part of cardio itself, which is going to help me lose weight, etc. So yeah, I think there are many of these metrics, and some of the rules that I apply is, one is that, of course, it should be time bound, it should be measurable, and all those kinds of things. But it's usually like, if it's a rate, if it's a percentage, if it's a ratio, then it's more more insightful than just a solid number. Also, if it's easy to compare it against the previous time period or not. So a metric that I can see in the next 30 days and then compare it with the previous 30 days would be slightly better than a metric like body fat percentage. Honestly, in 1 month, it will not change, right? It
Okay.
will not change. It might change in 3 months, but it may not change that much in a month. However, your percentage of showing up to the gym obviously can be measured on a weekly basis. You can say week on week analysis, month on month analysis. So something that is comparable over time periods is slightly better for me to measure. So there are these small metrics, they feed into the OMTM, and the OMTMs feed into the North Star metric. That's like the hierarchy that we are slowly getting to.
Okay.
Right. Now let's go to business a little bit when we talk about stage specific metrics. So we discussed the A3R3 funnel, the growth funnel. And it's very helpful to map metrics to the stage of the funnel, right? And we've done this, if you remember, we've done this briefly when we discussed the A3R3 funnel. So we were saying, okay, awareness would be like impressions, reach, etc. And then acquisition would be like signups, leads, etc. And we will also discuss that, just to review, we also discussed that we cannot generalize it. It's not every time that a specific metric should belong to that stage of the funnel. So it depends on the business, depends on what you're doing. What I would typically do is, when I work with startups, I assign one metric to each stage of the A3R3 funnel.
Okay.
So I don't want them to get confused. So let's say if I'm talking about awareness, I will say, okay, let's say YouTube is your channel. Let's just see the number of video views, right? And that's our main awareness metric from that channel. If we are looking at acquisition and maybe you're just driving traffic from your YouTube videos to a landing page, then just look at the number of leads that are coming from the landing page. So one metric at each stage of the funnel, provided you're doing experiments in all the stages of the funnel, is the simplest framework that I use. And then it gets more complicated based on the startup size and if they're using 10 channels, etc. See, typically I suggest that if one channel works for you, just go all in on that channel, right? So let's say Instagram works for you. If you've mentioned fashion e-commerce as an example, let's say Instagram is the one that works for you. Don't get too confused about, what to measure from Facebook. If your audience is not there, if your audience is basically on Instagram, then you should be measuring one key metric from that channel for awareness, one key metric from acquisition, etc. Right. And then you're taking people from Instagram to a link in bio, let's say, and then asking them to buy a product. Then you're measuring your revenue from your Shopify store, etc. So try to get to that level where you have this one key metric to each stage of the funnel. And of course, there's no problem in adding 2 or 3, etc. It's just like a simple framework to start with. You can build on top of that as you expand.
Right. Okay.
Right. Then there is the one metric that matters / only metric that matters. Some people call it only metric that matters. It's basically like one metric that matters right now the most. Right? And the thing is that, you'll often see, okay, things are going well, everything is going smooth. And suddenly the CEO comes and says, this is all not important right now. The only thing which is important is this, right? And it happens naturally, but that's sort of that one metric that the entire team should just capture and say, this is the direction in which the company is going. And hence, at this stage, if we can improve this metric, everything else will either become easier or unnecessary.
Okay.
This is also a concept in the book called The One Thing, which I have sitting there. I don't know if you can see. The One Thing is a book which says, what if you had to decide one thing that you could accomplish, because of which everything else would become unnecessary or not, or easier. So either you don't need to do everything else or everything else becomes easier. That's your one thing. That's your one metric that matters in case of lean analytics. So I'll give you an example. There was a SaaS company that I was consulting, and for them, they came up with a lot of goals. So they were like, we want to acquire customers, we want to do this, we want to do that. But then I asked them, what's your North Star? So this is also going to explain you the difference between the North Star and the OMTM. So they said the North Star is to, maintain X amount of dollars MRR, which is monthly recurring revenue. And then we figured out that their churn rate, which is the rate at which they were losing customers, was a bit higher.
Okay.
And if they would just fix their churn rate and go from, I'm just putting numbers here, but let's say they would go from 40% to 20% churn rate, they would already reach their MRR goals. They wouldn't even need to acquire new customers to do that, right? So while sometimes you come with a confusing mindset of, maybe I need to do this, but maybe you just need to do something else to achieve that same. So I told them, okay, your North Star stays the same. I cannot change your North Star. That's where you want to go. Your North Star is going to be, let's say, 10,000 monthly recurring revenue. But to do that, you don't really need to acquire new customers. You just want to keep the customers that you already have, because your revenue goes down every time you lose customers. So then their OMTM became to reduce the churn rate. So churn rate became the OMTM, and then going from 40% to 20% became their goal for the OMTM.
Okay.
So that's how that, and then OMTM fed back into the North Star metric. So like I gave you an example of in personal life, we can measure things month on month. But in business, what we do is something called cohort analysis, which is also a monthly analysis. But instead of just the time, we are seeing the people who came into the funnel in month 1 versus the people who came into the month in month 2, and then analyzing both their data separately, right? So here's why this is important. Mostly we are executing things on a monthly basis. So when I discussed with you the growth sprints, I said we do weekly sprints and then new ideas experimenting every month, right?
So Rishabh, for the second month, the people who came in, they could be like the repeats from month 1 also, or are we only measuring the new people who came in?
So I'm looking at it this way. Let's say, so now it's April 2023. Everyone who came into our funnel in March 2023, I'll continue to track them as cohort 1, even for the actions that they do in April.
Okay.
And then people who came into our funnel in April 2023, I'll continue to track them as cohort 2. Even if they take certain actions in May 2023, they'll still be counted as cohort 2. And the reason I do that is because I know what I executed in March, what experiments I did in March, and the cohort 1 analysis would be based on those experiments. Because if you acquired them through different channels, also they'll behave differently. It's more of a segment-based analysis. But if they came at different times of the year, also they would behave differently. That's a cohort-based analysis. So segment-based analysis is based on either the channel they came from. So someone came from Instagram could behave differently from someone who came from Pinterest to your website. But let's say you take a good example of fashion e-commerce. If someone came in the summer months, would behave differently than someone who came into your funnel during holiday season. Maybe someone who came into your funnel during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, only buys from you when there's a discount. So their cohort would behave slightly differently than someone who came in October, which was before the holiday season started, or September, for example. Someone who came in on winters would behave differently. So that's called cohort-based analysis. Saying that someone who came in from Instagram will behave differently from someone who came in from Pinterest is segment-based analysis. So you're creating a segment of users who came from a specific channel. You could also say people who are 18 to 24 in age would behave differently from people who are 25 to 36, which is an example. That's also a segment. So that's also a segment-based analysis. Then you can have a combination of cohort and segments, but yeah, let's not get into that, but you get the idea, right? Yeah. Then there's about the tools. And of course, there's one tool that comes to mind when we all speak about analytics, which is Google Analytics. It's the most popular analytics tool. It's free to use. Most businesses use Google Analytics, at least start there. And it sort of does the job for most businesses. And what I recommend is having the base tool is Google Analytics, but then having some channel-wise specialized tools. So for example, if you do online ads, on Facebook, Google, etc., you will need some sort of attribution tracking tool, specialized tool for tracking performance from ads I don't want to name names in this video, but there are different tools that help you track, because things are different after the iOS
Yes.
change. It's not as easy to just track it on Google or on Facebook, specifically on Facebook. So I would combine Google Analytics with some sort of specialized tool for those channels. So I can give an example from email marketing, e-commerce email marketing. We use Klaviyo, right? We discussed that already in the email marketing lesson. So Google Analytics may not be enough to decide how your performance of your email campaigns is. So you combine Google Analytics and the Klaviyo Analytics to then really bring out how email performance works. So think about it. In fact, you tell me, for email, how would you use Google Analytics and Klaviyo together? How do you feel that, what do you think that would be a good combination of using those two tools?
So I think Klaviyo would be the analytics or the data we would get would be very specific to the campaigns or specific to the email campaigns. And from Google Analytics, we could, maybe gather the data on user behavior on the website.
Exactly.
And yeah, following that, we can, set up our email campaigns.
Right. So once people open the email, Klaviyo captures, even though it could not be very accurate. People click on the email, Klaviyo captures. People are on the website now after they've clicked on the email. Google Analytics could be better there, like you said. We have the data from the email campaigns itself, the automations inside of Klaviyo, and then once people are on the website, if you really want to see how much time they spent, what they clicked on, etc., bounce rate, all those kinds of things could be much better to then move to Google Analytics. So these two tools would work very well together. Similarly, any other channel specific tool plus Google Analytics. So those are actually all of the key takeaways from the book. But there is one more thing which is interesting in the book, is that they have their own stages, just like we made our A3R3 funnel. These are all of the different funnels that are out there, right? So we're not going to get into all of those. We already have sort of an A3R3 funnel, which is the master funnel of all of these, I believe. Even Pilot Metrics does not include awareness. We have awareness in the A3R3 funnel. All the other stages are same. Retention, revenue, and referral, we have discussed that they can be in different order. But Lean Analytics has something called empathy, stickiness, virality, revenue, and scale. Okay. And you see that there are some arrows here, and it says gate needed to move forward. This is actually a picture from the book itself. Okay. So the gate needed to move forward. And I'm just going to read it out, and I think you'll understand. So I found a real poorly met need, a reachable market phases. So now you're thinking not as a user, but as the person doing the business. So I found a real poorly met need. So there is a need, but it's not being met good enough. And there is a reachable market. Remember that we're not saying sizable market, which is a term that investors use, which means big, huge markets, right? We're just saying a reachable market. We are entrepreneurs / marketeers, not investors. So for us, it's a reachable market. It may not be sizable. For investors, they're just looking at how big the money can be. So they are looking at sizable market. The next thing is I figured out how to solve the problem in a way that they will accept and pay for, right? So this is what you need to go from here to here. I've built the right product features, functionality that keeps users around. This is what you need to keep people sticking to your product. The users and features fuel growth organically and artificially, which means that they are sharing, they're talking about it to other people. And that's what you need for virality. And to get to the next stage, which is revenue. And then I found a sustainable, scalable business with the right margins and a healthy ecosystem. Margins are important to scale, because if you don't make margins, you can still scale a business. That's the truth. You can still scale a business that does not make margins. And this is what startups do all the time when they get funding. They can scale a business which is not making margins, profit margins, etc. And you hear these stories every time where startup keeps raising funding, keeps going into a viral growth loop, keeps scaling, and then shows that they are not making any margins. And those kinds of businesses would eventually fail, or sometimes even have a successful exit based on how the startup ecosystem works. There is some sort of, obviously there are elements of startup ecosystem being a bubble in that scenario. But if you actually find a sustainable way to scale a business with the right margins, then you should be scaling. Like that's the point when you should be getting to scale. And of course, when you are doing that and when you have scaled it well enough, you can achieve a successful exit, which you can sell your business, etc. But yeah, that's sort of the lean analytics framework in summary for you.
Got it. Yeah. This was self-explanatory, and I think you explained it very well in terms of how we related the personal goals to the businesses. So yeah, that makes
I would say
much
this book, if you understand this chart, then you're basically done with the book. But then there is also a lot of deep insights. So still recommend reading the book. These are some metric examples. I wouldn't go in detail on this because honestly, personally, I don't believe that there are some metrics which are better than others, etc. Obviously, there are some characteristics of metrics that I've already shared, but people should pick their own metrics. People can always take a screenshot of this if they're watching this video and they want to use it for reference. But nothing really that I would, say stands out for me, except of course conversion rate, which is something we discussed in detail, is a metric that can be applied anywhere in the funnel.
Okay.
Finally, to end, I am going to give a framework. As I usually do, I've made my own framework for lean analytics, which is the 5 Ps of lean analytics. The first one is to pick the metrics that matter. So not random metrics. It sounds very obvious, but I know entrepreneurs going crazy about how many followers they have on Instagram, etc., which may or may not matter to the bottom line. Pick metrics that matter, prioritize experiments, personalize your approach, pinpoint customer pain points, and promote a data-driven culture. The fifth point is sort of the most important when you're growing as a business, which we haven't spoken about, is to have your team actually follow a data-driven culture, right? So when you talk about data, when you put metrics that everyone understands that are out there, when you repeat them enough times, and when you explain them why they're important, the team gets aligned to what you're talking about, right? So we could have a business, Swati, like our agency, we could be just talking about creative things. We could just be talking about what's the next best creative campaign we can launch.
Yeah.
But you know that I always talk about the numbers. I always say, we are at this much percent, we want to get to this much percent. And the reason we are not just talking about it, but also explaining why that number is important, is to promote this culture in the company.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Also, I think the 5 Ps of lean analytics, they're very interrelated to each other. Like, when you pinpoint your customers' pain points, so according to them, you can prioritize what kind of experiments you want to run, and personalize it according to each pain point or your experiments.
Exactly. I think one thing is just that these frameworks help me think. I don't have to remember a lot. I just use the framework and then get things done, because this is something that I would repeat many times for many businesses. So, and yeah, you're right. The experiments that you prioritize have to be based on the metrics that you pick.
Yeah.
And then you can only personalize it once you know what your customer pain points are. And when you have this mindset, when you're doing all of this, you'll be able to describe it to your team, get them aligned, and hence promote a data-driven culture.
Right, exactly. And in terms of experiments, again, are we talking here like prior? I know this is like kind of generalized, but are we talking about experiments on a monthly basis in a particular time frame, or just for that particular pain point or for that particular metric as a general?
Yeah. So in general, our growth experiments that we design could be many. Like, let's say we have 2 people on the team. They both come with 4 ideas each. Now you have 8 growth experiments to solve your customers' pain points and be able to achieve your goals at the same time. Now, how do you execute? Do you execute all 8 at a time? So one part of lean analytics is also lean execution, right? So you prioritize the experiments that you think will get the best results.
Okay.
And not just by intuition, but also by data. So if you have past data on those experiments, either from your business or another business, or a case study that you've read online to show that, this kind of experiment could work better than the rest, then prioritize, like do that first. So here's an example from your personal journey, right? Like you will hear, if you just Google how to gain weight or YouTube, how to gain weight, there'll be thousands of advices, right? And these could be experiments that you could try. But the first thing you may not be doing is buying some jacket that helps you gain weight, right? Because you think that maybe that experiment does not have enough data to show that it's viable or, very effective. So just like you do it there, we would do it in business. We would see which of those experiments have the best data points. They could also suggest just sit down and watch Netflix the whole day, don't do anything and keep eating. You might not want to do that, right? So prioritize the experiments that you think matter. And typically, I also use a framework for that. Not going to get into that in this video, but basically what I do is I look at, do I have data to show, past data to show that this can be successful? So let's say if it's an influencer marketing campaign for a fashion brand, I have a lot of past data that this would work. Reaching out to micro influencers, that experiment would work. But if it could be also a referral marketing campaign for an e-commerce brand, maybe I don't have that much data. I have not done a lot of those experiments. I'm just saying an assumption. So I would prioritize the one that I have done before. Right. Now, there are two specific frameworks for this, the I score and the SPY score, not discussing in this video, but those scores also help you assign a number to experiments.
Okay.
Which lets you prioritize those experiments.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's much more clearer now. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. So that was it in lean analytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Bye.